Incredible. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guests, one of which has already been on the program, Mr. Dovid and Mrs. Miriam Feldman. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Jeff. What a pleasure to be back.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is great. And in preparing for this interview, David, I went through your Twitter stream a little bit so I can do some gotcha questions. And I went to yours, Miriam, and I realized that you're smarter than both your husband and I because you don't use Twitter that much.
I agree.
So that already shows you like the intelligence level is already higher on your end, most definitely.
Well, she picked a good husband, so she must be smart.
There you go. There you go. But I'm really excited about this, by the way. So I wanted to, before we get into everything, why don't you give the audience an idea of who you are, what you do, just your whole spiel.
I should go first. Okay, so I'm a somatic healer and marriage coach. I'm a trauma specialist as well. And I take women, I work mostly with women, and I take them into their bodies so they can get clarity, relief, and release in different situations in their life or different relationships in their life. And the body talks to us. And so that's how I help women get empowered and in touch with their intuitive wisdom, because not all advice is for everybody. And so when a person comes to someone and you just say, well, do this, do that, what do we know? Everybody has their own soul journey. So I help women with that. And then I'm the author of a book too. So God Said What? And it's about, I became religious an Orthodox Jew in my early 20s. And it was kind of a very interesting journey. So I share it in my book, and it's very connected to what I share now about dating and marriage and some of the insight, about that.
Awesome. I want to learn a little bit more about that. I'm going to butcher this, about the whole somatic thing, because that just went right over my head. But I'm curious about how, I think we tend to neglect the impact of our bodies on our minds, right?
Yeah.
We all know that we should be taking care of our bodies, working out, eating right, but I don't think that we focus as much on the body-mind connection. So
yeah.
definitely look forward to learning more about that.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll be happy to share.
Totally.
All right, and your turn, David.
Okay.
Well, ladies first and all that.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be back on your show. We've known each other for a bunch of years already, Jeff. So this is a real pleasure to say hello to your audience once again. I always appreciate it. I am a licensed family and marriage therapist, and I love working with couples on building great relationships. My Twitter feed is called Building Great Marriages, and that is a life passion of mine. I get so much pleasure when I see people of all ages come together, men and women, and just really develop strong, powerful, intimate connection. I feel very strongly that this is one of the primary purposes of why God created men and women, was to come together. And that is fraught with many, many challenges, as it should be. It's designed to be that way, as we know from the famous story of Adam and Eve, right? There were problems within the first 10 minutes. They were already fighting, right? And that's just the way it goes. And I'm here to help because I've made many mistakes in my life, and then I proceeded to educate myself, work on myself. I've had the luxury of such a patient, loving wife by my side the whole time. And I love to share that wisdom with others and help people have terrific relationships. So yeah, that's who I am, and that's what I do.
Great. Now, can you tell me a little bit about what you guys do together? Because I mean, you and your wife bring different aspects to what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We have a foundational program called Recreating Intimacy that we do together with couples. And what this program basically does, it's really for literally anybody in relationship. So it could be premarital, it could be during, of course, it's primarily during the marriage. And even for couples who are on their way out, to help rescue the marriage or save the marriage. And it may even be working with somebody who's actually almost 90% of the way through their divorce.
Oh, wow.
Kind of resurrect, what they have. But the idea is that, one of my founding principles is marriage is more about what you do than how you feel. And I believe that there are some foundational principles that if we become good at, we don't have to master. It's hard to master anything, let alone relationships. But if we become good at certain foundational principles, it has immediate and positive effects on your relationship. And our program, the couples come in and they work primarily with me on the marriage aspect. And then they'll work with my wife. The women will work with my wife on more of the emotional release, as she mentioned to you earlier, which is really a key part of the program, because in working in relationships and working on relationships, there's so much that comes up, whether it's through the dynamic that's being changed within the current relationship, or maybe even past issues. And that's kind of like beyond the scope of what I'm currently focusing on for the women. And my wife really comes in there and helps women say, your husband's asked me to do this, and I just don't feel it. I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, or, I can't, or, he said to me 5 years ago, this and that, or even other issues, and I'll let her speak to it, but even other issues that go back to the woman's childhood that are being brought up in marriage counseling. My wife really helps these women process their trauma. So I kind of work with the couple in a very unique way, and we can talk about that later, but I work in a very unique way with the couple, moving them through the curriculum as well as whatever issues that they're facing.
And working with them individually.
Yeah, I work with them individually primarily, and there's homework, readings. It's really fast. It's a great way of helping couples move from a place of distress and maybe resentment to a place of love, connection, gratitude, appreciation, and excitement about their marriage. And it's a program that we do together, and it's really successful. So we're very excited about it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was watching another interview with you guys, and I heard that Miriam, that you have stolen some of Dovid's female clients. And a little bit about that, like, walk us kind of through that process of how that came about.
Sure. So
more importantly, did you get to keep that part of the money?
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah. So what happens is somatic healing is different than talk therapy, because emotions are energy in the body. And when we pay attention to that energy in the body, it's really the physical sensations inside. So if someone gets angry, their jaw will clench or their chest will constrict. If they're fearful, their stomach will drop. And so we're not used to being in touch with those physical sensations, but they are messages for us. Each emotion has a message for us. So when I take a woman through our session, not only is there healing and release, but there's also clarity, because she'll come with a situation. My husband did this 5 years ago. I don't know how to get over it. Or he said this to me the other day. And then with those specifics, we actually go in and we see, where do you feel that in your body? And this is done all over the phone. I don't have to see anyone on Zoom or anything like that. I can hear it in her voice. And she's also sharing with me what's going on with her body. I feel something like this. And then we can also tap into her mind. What is her mind saying? Because we have thoughts that affect the body, and we have the body that affects the thoughts. Plus, there are release techniques, because what do we do with all these emotions? What do we do with these resentments? And how can we release that? And how can we shift neural pathways as well? Sometimes there is a trauma from the past. And what's interesting is that the body will bring up memories sometimes that the woman hasn't thought of for 20 years, but the body is saying to her, you can process this now. And that's why the memory comes up. And so sometimes we'll go back in time, but the women are always kept grounded. And this is a way so that nothing can block what's happening presently in the marriage now. And so people can move forward with love and connection instead of bitterness, resentment, that kind of thing.
Hanging on to old traumas that just never leave. You know,
Yeah.
with men, it's very different. You know, Jeff, we're very rational and intellectual, and we're able to disassociate our emotions from our kind of state of being. You
Yeah.
know, we can function very well, even if we're angry or tired or feeling resentful. It's like we just have like this on and off switch. You know, we can just be like, okay, now I'm going to feel something. And then I'm like, okay, well, now I got to do some work. So I'm going to click that. I'm just going to click it off.
Yeah. You
I'll say that.
compartmentalize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And women have a much harder time doing that. And so that's really where the benefit of a lot of what my wife brings to the table comes in, because she's able to help women kind of get over some of the stuff that it's holding them back from fully being present, fully enjoying their husband, fully enjoying the relationship, fully giving to their husband, and receiving. You know, receiving is a huge thing for women. It's hard for them to receive when they're feeling upset or distrustful, or you know, you could have said something 10 years ago and she still can't receive from you to this very day.
Yeah. So I also, what I do is I keep speaking about emotional safety, and that we're all walking nervous systems. And so we don't know what our husband's bringing to the table from childhood and from society, and what we're bringing to the table from childhood and society. And we're walking nervous systems. It's very easy for us to go into fight, flight, freeze, all that kind of stuff. So how can we bring more emotional safety for ourselves and into the home, so that even the husband can respond in such ways that he's not shutting down, fighting back, getting defensive. And you know, what I always tell women also is that the male culture is very into like no vulnerability,
Yep.
a lot of shame. And so a lot of husbands are allergic to shame. So a woman, the way she might, you know, ask another woman for help is, hey, can you help me do this? For a man, it might feel like a to-do list. There might feel like there's judgment there or something, as even as, you know, innocent as taking out the garbage. And men are allergic to shame. So they can even hear it in the woman's voice, that energy that's there. So that's some of the skills that I bring also for the women is, you know, let's say it this way. And remember, this is where he's coming from. And so how can we, again, bring emotional safety into the marriage so that you're both happy?
You know, I want to touch on the emotional safety in a second, because David, I saw you tweeting a lot about this. And it's funny, it reminded me of something that I saw a pastor say. I'll go into that later. But I wanted to actually, because we talked about this on DM, about marriage being a job and not your status.
Yes.
And when I first saw that, I was like, I mean, I kind of get it, but that seems kind of off-putting. It's a job. But it's funny because I couldn't wait to tell you this, because this morning I was thinking about, like, you know what? I have a job and I love my job. I love what I do. I love to have these conversations. I love videos. I love to love fighting liberty. I love what I do. I am very blessed. And I was like, okay, that might make sense, because if you can love your job and you're married to a job, then you should love that too, right?
Yeah.
In terms of job, but people talk for work, my job. Well, you automatically assume that people just don't like their jobs, or that, you know, they're just not really edifying to them. But I'm one of those people who loves his job. And so when I made that connection, I was like, that makes sense. It should be more than a status. It should be like a job that you love to go to. So can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of points that you brought up about this idea, you know, that marriage is a job. It's not your status. And what I mean by that is that, you know, I think it's pretty clear for people who use social media, but, you know, for those who don't, the idea is that today, you know, you can look on somebody's profile, whether it's on Facebook or other places, and you can just flip a switch to go from in relationship, engaged, and then married, you know, something like that.
And it seems so stagnant with that as a status then.
Right. So, you know, and that to me is very reflective of the idea that that marriage is viewed in many circles as something we achieve. a level that we kind of get to. And this, for me, kind of underscores and, disconnects the reality of marriage from the name of marriage, because we never achieve marriage. We're always in marriage and working on marriage. And for a man in particular, I think your audience may appreciate this. Marriage is our marriage is our responsibility. And that's why I connected to a job. It is a goal, it is a mission, it is a job, it is a responsibility. It's my job to make sure that my wife is happy, my kids are safe, I provide a home, I provide, finances, I provide leadership, spiritual leadership. I know your audience will appreciate that. Spiritual leadership, as well as intellectual leadership, physical leadership. I'm responsible for the people who I've brought into my life and made included as part of it's defined as part of my family. So it's a job. And yes, I think you're 100% right. I love my job as a husband and as a father as well. Not always.
Well, yeah, I mean, even I don't always like it. I love it also. Sometimes I want to be okay. So, as you guys know, it's a cesspool out there.
Yes.
Being in focus all the time, and just the way to manage that part of it too. So there are aspects of, but overall, sounds a lot like marriage. How marriage should be.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a very important paradigm, because once we move into marriage as a responsibility, we've elevated it. See, that's the key point here. It's not about how I'm feeling this moment. It's not about me. When I focus on my feelings, am I happy? So again, there's nothing wrong with asking yourself that question. That's a good question to ask yourself. But when that becomes the totality of my definition of my relationship, so I've just lowered the entire concept of marriage, the entire institution of marriage, to nothing more than how I'm feeling at this moment in time. Right. And so we need to, in my opinion, bring back the tradition of and the responsibility for the sake of masculinity, of the responsibility of being a married man. Right. And so, it's a very important elevation that we give to this. It's a responsibility. It's a job. There are certain things I need to do, whether I'm feeling like it or not. There's going to be certain aspects of marriage that are unpleasant for me. There certainly will be aspects of marriage which are challenging for me. There's going to be certain times where, in my mind, I could fantasize that if I wasn't married, my life may be different in positive ways. Those thoughts are normal, but none of those thoughts are actionable, because I'm married and I've made a commitment to my wife, to myself, to God, that this is my mission. And like you said, it's when we give it that importance, we invite into our life meaning, joy, happiness, pleasures that are just exponentially greater than if I'm only focused on how I'm feeling at this moment in time. It's a journey. It's a journey with infinite benefit.
So this is very interesting. So Miriam, I kind of want you to expand on the concept of marriage as a job from a woman's perspective. So to Dovid just said about when you're not always, because in your body, you might not always feel like doing something nice for your husband or appreciate it. You have to do those things regardless of how you feel. You're always going to feel that emotion all the time. Your body's, because I think a lot of it, we think, oh, we're not in love anymore because I don't feel it in my body anymore. I don't feel the emotion in my body anymore. That's not necessarily true, because you still have that affection. But Miriam, can you kind of expand on that aspect of it, but also on the concept from a wife's perspective?
Sure. So just because we feel something doesn't mean that we're going to act on it, number one. And it doesn't mean that we're not thinking a thought that's causing the body to react in a certain way that's not even a truthful thought. So that's where the dynamic of the sessions go. At the same time, there are release techniques when we do feel emotions and we don't feel like doing something and we feel anger or grief or sadness, whatever it is, or fear, that we can release it. So we can always be honest with ourselves. We can always be honest in privacy. And then we get bigger with our energy. We sometimes do writing, ripping, sometimes temper tantrums, whatever movement it is that can release some of that fight and flight response. And but then we can either choose to talk to our husbands about something that came up, or our children, or whatever it is, or we might receive intuition, or some kind of soul guidance, or just a higher intention in knowing why we are where we are. And so that's the key. So the key is not to skip the human stuff, not to skip, I don't feel like this, or this is annoying, or whatever. It's to release it, but we don't need to explode on someone. We don't need to implode on ourselves. So that's where the somatic part comes in. And it's so beautiful because you never have to be dishonest with yourself. You never have to do something called a spiritual bypass. Well, I'm here because, God wants me here, and therefore I've got to suck it up, or, just smile and be happy. No, sometimes you're going to smile and be happy. Sometimes you're going to roar it out. So, I have a roar process, I call it, so there's all different ways of managing what's going on inside of us within a marriage, within and within a family, because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not always going to feel good.
Right. So as far as your job in the marriage.
Oh, the job part.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes it's the video freezes a little bit, and so I don't catch your words. Oh yeah, so the job part. So again, as I was writing my book, I was sharing when I was in the secular world, completely atheistic. I grew up Jewish, but had really no sense of or belief in God or connection with my Judaism. And so when I started to learn about more traditional values in the Orthodox way, it was fascinating to me how what marriage is, and the seriousness of it, the responsibility of it, the accountability, but also the joy and pleasure that can come with it as well. So when we do get married, there's like a higher intention, and there's a goal to be as a team. And so what works well for the relationship, what works well for the team, that's why there's that emotional safety. If we go around, I have a blog post that, is honesty the best policy in your marriage? Well, no, it's not. And I grew up with say whatever you want to say, whenever you want to say it. Well, is that going to bring emotional safety to the team, to the relationship? No. I guess if we look at it as a job, but a beautiful job with lots of meaning and with other humans involved, we can reach to be even our higher self in that connection. And so that is part of like our accountability, but opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's why you don't answer the question when your wife asks you if that dress makes her look fat.
Yeah, men learn this the hard way. That's true.
We sure do. I don't know if you saw that tweet about that guy talking about how men on Twitter think that they've hit the big time if their wife is hot or whatever, and then he talks about his wife. I'm like, I'll have to show it to you if you haven't seen it. But
okay.
His mouth, like you could tell what he was trying to say, but he worded it wrong, and he was like, my wife's a great mother, and yada yada yada. So the implication was that his wife wasn't hot, but she was a good mother. But I don't think that's what he was trying to communicate. Twitter was laughing at him so much.
Well, yeah. Well, there's that famous statement on Twitter that says, if you're on Twitter, every day there's going to be somebody that the entire community makes fun of. Your job is just to not be that person.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody needed to tell him that. Definitely.
Did you see that one with the guy who videotaped his wife shoveling the snow? It was a couple of years ago. He's inside his window, and he's taking a videotape of his wife shoveling the driveway. and then he mentioned like she's pregnant or something like that. She just got home from work, and he's like,
that.
I've got such a great wife, you know. And then the entire Twitter, I mean, like everybody from the right, from the left, everybody piled in on this guy. Like, how could he be standing there with the camera taking his wife's pregnant? She just got home from a shift, you know. It was so funny. Oh my god!
Yeah, I remember that. That was beautiful.
But Jeffrey, I do want to say something, because what happens is women will ask their husbands, like, how does this look on me or whatever. I still hold my husband responsible that I used to like wear something or have my hair, like I wear a wig. So this is actually a wig, but I used to have a different kind of wig. And I still hold him responsible that, why didn't you tell me that it didn't look good? Well, you always look so beautiful. So what happens is I even have a friend, and she says, I'm not going to ask my husband because he's just going to say it looks good. So I have to ask a friend or a relative, you know? So we've caught on.
I mean, we're kind of biased. I mean, I tell my significant other, like, you don't want to ask me that question because you can be wearing a burlap sack and you still look gorgeous to me. So,
100%.
Yeah. Not only is that the right answer, it's the true answer.
Yes,
that's right.
Very good. And it's bait. When a woman says to her husband, how does this look on me? It's bait. Don't fall for it.
You heard it here, folks. So you just like gave us a behind the scenes view of what women think. Women are going to be mad at you for that. Here's a question. When we're talking about a job, if they're approaching this in a more in a job focused way.
Did you hear? He asked the question. We didn't hear it.
We sometimes we're having a hard time hearing you because it kind of cuts off a little bit.
Yeah, I think the feds are messing with my internet a little bit. It was working fine just yesterday. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question, related to the status-based approach rather than the job-based approach, how can people know if they're falling into more of a status-based mentality rather than a job-based mentality when it comes to marriage or relationships?
Sure. That's a great question. And so you and I actually talked about this last time. So we'll touch upon some of the concepts that we talked about last time. I think the first and primary sign is if you don't have a vision and a mission for your marriage. That is that if you feel like you've made it, or you've kind of, if you feel that marriage is just an extension of dating, like we know each other, we like each other, I'm going to give her a ring, and then 6 months later, we still like each other, God willing, and love each other even more, and then I'm going to get married. That is a status-based approach. That is, I'm connecting with you because I love you. Beautiful. You should always love the person who you get married to 100%.
Amen.
And forever, by the way. But you're missing, in my opinion, you're missing the bulk work of what a marriage is. A marriage is a mission and a journey that you're taking with this other person to create something greater than what you two are just by yourselves. So a marriage is, how are we going to grow as a family? A marriage is, how are we going to grow together as a couple? A marriage is, what are we as a team doing with our lives? Right? A marriage is, how can I support you to be the best person that you can be? And how are you planning to support me to be the best person that I'm going to be? A marriage is taking on responsibilities, like my wife said, for the team. What responsibilities? When I say responsibilities, I mean going out of your current comfort zone and shouldering obligations for the sake of us, right? What responsibilities are you taking on for the team? So all these different things are all part of what it means to be on a mission, to have a goal, to have a plan. And so therefore, that's not a status. That's not, I really like dating you and I want to make you mine. That's a beautiful thing. That is part of the journey. So I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is that don't get stuck there.
Yeah, it shouldn't stop there. That should be the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. That is the beginning. And for those who haven't heard, the last time we talked, I gave this example, which I know I'm speaking for a while about it, but I feel this example is very important.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between if somebody has the goal of climbing Mount Everest. So there's an enormous amount of pre-work that a person has to do before they climb Mount Everest. So they have to research it. They have to physically get in shape. They have to buy everything. It could be thousands of dollars. They have to make the reservations. They actually have to get to base camp.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an enormous amount of work. That could take several years to get all that stuff in order, just like finding your spouse.
Right.
But getting to base camp with all your gear on and the oxygen mask in your face is nothing to do with actually climbing Mount Everest. Those are completely different activities that require completely different skill sets that have totally nothing to do really technically with each other. One's a preparatory state for the other. And that's the way it is with dating and engagement versus actually being married. And we see this in real life because how many times have my wife and I dealt with or seen in our own lives, or maybe you in your own life, people dating for years and getting along just fine. Then all of a sudden they get married, and within 6 months or 2 years, they're divorced. What happened? You were dating the person for 11 years and you finally decided to put a ring on it. And 2 years later, 6 months later, you're divorced. Why? Because marriage, just because you're good at getting to base camp, doesn't mean you have the skills and the perseverance and the ability to climb the mountain. So our jobs is to share with everybody the mistakes that we made climbing the mountain so that you don't have to.
I mean, there was tons of truth to all of that, and I think it's unfortunate because a lot of people miss that. I mean, I did earlier in my life, and learning the hard way is tough, but at least you still learn. Hopefully,
Yes.
So I want to kind of go into emotional safety, because that's something that I've seen you talk about, and Miriam, you mentioned it earlier. Why is emotional safety important?
So emotional safety is important because, again, we're walking nervous systems. So if I feel controlled, and it reminds me of feeling controlled when I was, a child or with my parents or something like that, I'm going to have very big energy about that. I am going to flip out. I'm going to be like, no one's controlling me. All those kind of thoughts, all those memories, the sensation that it's still in my cells, in my body. But if someone speaks to me a different way or shares something with me a different way, then I'm going to have a completely different reaction. So one thing that sometimes my husband and I do is that when my husband sees me start getting revved up about a situation or something with the kids or whatever, he'll ask me the question, what are you afraid of? And then that helps me as a woman drop into my seat of power, which is my emotions. Then I get to communicate from, because at first I might not make sense what I'm saying. Like, I might be future tripping about the worst possible scenario or whatever, because I'm revved up in my system. When he says to me, what are you afraid of? Then I drop into my body and I can just share with him from a very connecting place. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of that. I'm worried about this. And then he hears all that, because women have all their windows open a lot of the time,
Yeah.
And then he can address that. And he can address that from a connecting point of view. He can address that from an emotional point of view, instead of just problem solving, where I might just be like, well, that's not going to work. And that's not going to work. So that's emotional safety on one level. And then with my husband, I can also, if I come hard at him with something, this needs to be done. And, why haven't you done it already? He's going to, feel like a little kid chastised, and he's going to either hit back, or he's going to, hit back with like words and defense. He's going to shut down. Maybe he remembers when his mother used to criticize him or something, and he's going to shut down, get silent, walk away. So that's where there isn't emotional safety in that. But if I come with, I'd love new chairs for the dining room. These are hard and they don't feel good or whatever. So he can hear that, and he can hear that as a desire coming from me rather than as and he wants to make me happy. There's been tons of surveys that say men want to make their wives happy, which is very interesting because women think they're telling their husbands all the time what they want, what makes them happy. The men aren't hearing it in that way, depending on the language that's being used and the energy that's behind it. And it's not funny. One time I was watching one of my sons, he opened up the refrigerator and he said, where's the butter? And it was like literally right in front of his face. It was very confusing to me. But a man's mind is different than a woman's mind. And they're different hormones. We have different everything. So we have different ways of providing emotional safety for ourselves and for the other person.
Yeah, that's true. And, and I like that question, what are you afraid of? Because that's a really focusing question.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
This is all boiled down to.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. So when you were talking about emotional safety earlier, it made me remember a time where I was at church and there was a sermon and the pastor was talking about marriage and relationships. And he had 2 jars filled with marbles. And he said the marbles are all of your experiences, all of your good memories, your bad memories, your trauma, and they're all in the jar. And, when you're single, you just have them in the jar. Maybe you deal with them, maybe you don't. But then he's like, but then when you get married, all of these marbles kept coming out. He's like, now you got all these marbles all over because of all the stuff that you carry into the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that when you were talking, I was like, that is like the exact same thing. And what's always so tragic about it is that most of us don't even realize what's happening unless you've had like that education, or if you've read about it or gone to therapy. You don't know that that's happening. Yeah, can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing, and that's why, like, society doesn't teach us about relationships or marriage or skills, and we don't sometimes see it in our own homes. So that's what's a shame, and that's why my husband and I do what we do, and we're trying to get out there as much as possible, because little things can make a huge difference. And why should people go through the pain and suffering when they don't have to? It's just sometimes a different energy, a different processing technique. It's different words, different language, different understanding. And then you guys can get along great. And it's great for the kids. It's great for you guys. Then we can pursue our bigger experiences in life, like careers, when there's peace in the home. So it's really life-saving.
For sure, for sure. One of the reasons why I talk about it a lot online is because, to me, it's the missing ingredient. It's the magic ingredient that many of the manosphere content providers aren't talking about. And it's crucial. It's crucial to be a good husband, because as a man, we naturally want to do what's always talked about online, which is to provide and protect, right? That's like the big thing, right? Be on your mission, provide, protect, be a leader. All those things are 100% very, very important, for sure. But you're missing one of the most important ingredients of a relationship if that is all you're focused on. And that is the emotional safety and connection that a woman desperately needs in order to feel connected with you. And the way this manifests so many times with my clients is a guy will get on the phone with me and say, I just don't understand why she's so upset. Why is she so distant? Why does she not want to make love with me anymore? Why is she always so angry and bitter? He says, I go to work. I bring home, I'm the single income earner. I am there every night for dinner. I take care of my kids. I do housework. What is she so upset about? What does she want from me already? Right? Like, it's like the guy's scratching his head. He's checking every single box. Mm-hmm. I'm a leader. I go to church, or I go to temple. Like, what on earth? What am I doing wrong? And it's from this place that I realized that what many men are just they don't even see. The fact that this person is coming to me with these questions means he doesn't even see what she needs. And that is the emotional safety, the emotional connection, the sense of caring, love, connection,
communication.
Thank you. Communication, learning how to listen, learning how to hear, learning how to apologize if necessary, learning when not to apologize. All the different emotional connecting techniques that she is so desperate for. A woman, more than she wants a house, or more than she wants a fancy car, or more than she wants financial, all that is extremely important for sure. But I've met many couples who have all that and are getting divorced. And I've met many couples that have solid emotional connection, and they can weather any external issues that come their way. They can weather any financial crisis, any childless crisis, heaven forbid, if a couple's facing that, because they are together emotionally. And this is some content that I feel is really missing out there. There's channel after channel after channel telling men how to be alpha males, how to be a leader in the home, telling them how to get on your mission and make sure you have be stoic, and all that is good. I love all that for sure. I could use more of that. Every man can use more of that. But how many channels, how many people are out there telling them, learn how to listen, come home and spend 20 minutes asking your wife proactively, how was your day? Tell me all about it. Simple, right? Those 20 minutes can be the difference between a happy wife and an intimate connection with her, helping her feel safe and heard, versus coming home and living in a nightmare.
And one thing I want to add, just because, so this doesn't become a trap, when he does ask her and she spills out and vents about how hard the day was or whatever's going on, hopefully it was a great day. But if not, with all the complaints, he doesn't necessarily have to fix it. He just needs to listen and compassionately and validation. I understand why that would be hard, and not jump into fixing it. Just jump into being there for her, validating her experience, having compassion, that kind of thing. I mean, there could be suggestions she can make maybe later, or maybe she wants some, but at first, and I'm sure you've experienced it, all of us have experienced it, when we share something with someone and then the other person tries to problem solve right away. And we don't feel heard, and we just kind of, so even with that, how are you question, or how was your day, just again to remember there to to be validating and compassionate and present.
And it's interesting that this isn't brought up in the manosphere, like you said, and I can tell you why. Because it's not sexy. It's not as sexy as saying be on your mission, be a high value man, be a high value woman, yada yada yada. Like you said, all that stuff's well and good. I mean, there's some toxicity out there with this stuff, but I mean, the general concept is valid. But it's not as sexy to talk about, well, men, you also need to listen to your wives. You need to ask how she's doing. You need to connect with her emotionally.
We gotta make it sexy.
In the famous words of Jesse Peterson, beta male, that's basically what he says.
Amazing. So I should have asked this question before we got into this, but I guess it's okay to ask it now. When we're talking about emotional safety, can you define that for us? What does that mean, to be emotionally safe?
Yes. Well, I'll give it a shot. So emotional safety is a feeling of security in a person's care, love, and commitment to the relationship and to their partner. So I'll say that again. Emotional safety is a feeling of a person's confidence and security in their partner's care, love, commitment to the relationship. And all three of those things are important. So care means that I'm a giving person. I'm a kind person. I do kindness and action for you. Okay. That's very important. I always encourage my clients, do something nice for your spouse every day, physical, whether it's bringing a coffee or it's rubbing her back or doing something on her to-do list, or just something in addition to, of course, Friday flowers and other things, right? And then love is an expression of appreciation and gratitude every day. Find something worthy of gratitude and appreciation in your spouse every day. And if you look, you can find not just one thing, you can find dozens. And if you're really good, you can find hundreds of things every day that your wife does for you that you don't even acknowledge right now, where you're at right now. And your vision is so bad that most people right now cannot even think of 2 or 3 things. But when we work together, they eventually become so good at it, they can find a dozen. And if I let them keep going, they can find more. And expressing that to her every day. So that's love. And the third thing was commitment. Commitment is the linchpin. And I talk about this obviously on my feed all the time, and it's my pinned tweet, especially for a woman. She needs to know that you're going to be there during the good times and the bad, that you are not going anywhere, that you will work through this no matter what it is. And this is a core foundational feeling of relationship and emotional safety that she needs in order to open up to you. Because she's not going to open up to you. She's not going to give to you. She's not going to show you her true self if she thinks there's the possibility of you walking out the door tomorrow.
Yeah, that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's definitely not safe. Yeah.
Not safe.
And obviously the first and foremost is that, the famous story of the preacher or the pastor who gives as a gift. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but he gives as a gift to every couple who he marries on the altar, he gives them a dictionary. And he hands them just like a Webster's dictionary, and people are just like, what the heck? Why is this guy handling me this dictionary? Right? Weird, right? Like maybe a toaster oven or something. What's with the dictionary?
Right. What do I do with the dictionary? I got Google.
So he explains it at every wedding that the dictionary is only missing one word that he cut out. And that's the word divorce.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he says every other word in this dictionary is fair game in a marriage, except for one. That word is gone.
Wow.
And that's the first and foremost in terms of the third aspect, which is commitment. We don't talk about divorce. That's not something that door was closed when I put the ring on your finger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those 3 things. Yeah.
And so when you the care, love, and commitment, are there different principles for men, or are they the same for men and women in your view? As far as emotional safety, are these what men need to feel emotionally safe too? I know we're less emotional, but we still got emotions.
Right. Yes. So a man would be a little bit different. I would agree with you. And as you said, it's not as much of a priority for men as it is for women, because we, like you said, like we talked about earlier, we can compartmentalize. My general statement regarding this is that when men create that emotional safety for a woman, they're going to get back the femininity and the level of devotion and loyalty that is required for us to show up every day and do our job, our marriage job. So I wouldn't say it's only for one or not for the other. I just feel like it's more like a reciprocal thing, like, because we don't walk around with the fear. Women, as men, we don't understand this. Women walk around with fear all the time. They're always afraid of something or another. When they walk down the street, they're afraid. When it comes to their relationship, they're always wondering, how are things going? What does he think of me? When it comes to their children, they're always nervous that the kids aren't going to, as long as my kids are getting somewhere between a B and a B plus in school and they didn't come home with a bloody nose, I'm good. I'm fine. But my wife's not fine. She's not fine.
It amazes me his capacity to ignore things and stick his head in the dirt.
I bet.
That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, we become ostriches pretty quick.
Yeah. So for men, it's different. We don't, although I agree with you that all those 3 things are important. Yes, I when I work with women, I definitely encourage them to express gratitude to their husbands every day. And I definitely encourage women to do a kindness for their husband every day. Oftentimes it involves affection. That's what men are primarily looking for, whether it's a hug or a kiss on the cheek. I had one woman I was working with who took on that she's going to greet her husband at the door every day when he comes home from work, that she normally didn't greet him at the door. And now she's going to get up from whatever she's doing. She walks downstairs, she gives him a kiss on the cheek. This is from a couple that was barely speaking to each other,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah. And this is something that she took on. And just even those little things, it's not complicated. You don't have to be a genius to do that. You just need to get up, go to the door, and give him a kiss on the cheek.
It's a priority. So that's the thing. It's making important things the priority.
And of course, commitment. Of course, a woman can't be walking around. Most women don't threaten. If a woman leaves, it's usually after a long period of trying her best to get things straight.
Because we're relationship beings, so we are always tuned into the relationship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what do you think, Jeff?
And the reason I asked that question is because I know that those apply to men too, but it just looks different. Like you said, like care to a woman is different from what it is for a man. I mean, we do tend to be more simple. Like, give me a kiss on the cheek when I get home. Hey, I'm good. We don't need a whole lot. And also, obviously, we need to know that our wives are committed to us. I mean, but that's common sense. But I guess to me, it's like, these things are so simple and they're so easy. My question then is, why do we have such a hard time with it? Because I mean, in relationships, I'm the type to make the woman that I'm with happy, but that doesn't mean that I always do the right thing or whatever. But to me, it's like it's honestly it's easier. So much from years, but just in general.
Wait, Jeff, you're freezing, so we can't hear it. Maybe you can repeat it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying, these things aren't rocket science, right?
Right.
So why do we have such a hard time with it?
Right. Yes.
What are the challenges with this stuff?
I'd like to say
sure,
something.
Please go for it. Yeah.
I think sometimes when you're doing important things in the world and you're bringing a lot of light in, there's an opposing component that's like a spiritual kind of thing that goes on. Like we get tested, I think. So it's like a couple could be really in love and then they walk over that threshold and they go into marriage, or in the Jewish faith, they stand under that chuppah. And the next day, it's kind of like all of a sudden she sees all the things about him that she didn't focus on before, but it makes her crazy, and then all the emotions come up and then emotional safety goes right out the window because he can hear judgment or women even come from, in Kabbalah terms, like a spiritual source of more of like the left eye or a discernment or kind of a strictness. So they're going to maybe sometimes even a critical eye. So they're going to see what needs to be fixed. Like Eve, or we call her Chava in Hebrew, when she was in the garden, it all had to do with what she could fix, what she could make better, what she could elevate. So women will kind of have that negative eye. And so as part of their spiritual practice is, okay, as a somatic healer, like, okay, I'll help you process those emotions that come up with that critical eye. But to your husband, where's the gratitude? Never take anything for granted. How do you, be kind, that kind of thing. If you need something done, how do you say it in terms that he, he's not going to be running from you. It's not going to feel like a to-do list a mile long. And so, again, that emotional safety. And then men come from a different spiritual energy and, they have different tests. And so, and all those marbles come together, like your pastor said. It's just kind of like, it gets a little messy, because it is such an elevated state to be in. It's like the PhD of life, marriage, and so, so I guess we get all these tests and we just have to become better people.
Yeah, it seems to me, I mean, even talking about this stuff, because I mean, a lot of that stuff, like the care, love, and commitment, yeah, those are easy concepts to understand. But the problem, I think, is that we just don't know this stuff. We're never taught this stuff. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. And so we don't realize, oh, hey, I might be bringing some baggage. Or if if she says something and we're taking it critically as men, oh, maybe she wasn't trying to criticize. Maybe there's just something else there. And possibly maybe she could have worded it better. But we don't think about these things. But I think it's because a lot of people just aren't educated on this stuff.
Why aren't we educated? Are you saying?
Yeah, why they teach us this in school? I mean, how
such a shame.
I guess I'm trying to ask this. Well, I mean, if we know that this is a problem, why haven't we as a society focused more on making sure that men and women understand these things? Because it seems like, that would set people up more for success. Like what you guys are trying to do, here's the mistakes we made, don't make these mistakes. But we don't really have a lot of that.
Right. I mean, you could go down, again, I'm not 100% familiar with your total audience, but obviously there's the whole conspiracy side, which is that the goal of society is to kind of break up the nuclear family and get us all to be working automatons. And, it goes even further where it's like women are supposed to be single and men are going to have babies through these, embryo builders and stuff like that. That's like a whole, I'm not going to get into that whole theory.
Never heard that one.
Yeah, that's kind of like dark down the rabbit hole of YouTube.
I do think that it may not look exactly like that. And I think there is a societal push for something like that to happen. Yeah, definitely.
It feels like that. I mean, with the accolades being given, these deviant, I don't want to use words that are going to offend anybody, but these obscure types of relationships, and in my opinion, extremely dysfunctional types of relationships, both for men and for women. And with the accolades being given and the applause and the attention, it seems obvious to me that there is an agenda here. I don't know who's driving it or what the end goal is personally, but it definitely feels like that's possible. The simpler answer to me is that many of these principles were taught in the home, right? They were not taught in school.
We're not taught in
No. It used to be that many of these principles were taught in the home. Children saw how their father spoke to their mother and how their mother spoke to their father
for the positive,
and right. Even dealing with conflict, and would learn masculinity, femininity. They learn how they ended up fighting, and they would see how they ended up making up. I know I saw this a lot in my home. My father was a relationship master, and it's not just that it's not because he didn't get into fights with his wife, with my mother. He did. I was there. I saw it. And so I know that it happened. But what for me, one of the lessons that I learned in my home was my father's tenacious dedication to the marriage itself, his sacrifice for his wife and his children, and his ability to humble himself for the sake of peace in the home, and all the actions that he took on a daily basis that fostered a sense of respect and honor and love and appreciation for his wife. And it didn't mean that they didn't fight. It just means that these were all things that I saw growing up. Today, I think,
and nothing was taught in school. That's for
sure.
Yeah,
nothing was taught in school.
Yeah, definitely.
Nothing. And why? I don't know why. I mean, I think it's kind of stupid. It should be taught in school. People are talking about it, that it should be taught in school. And then actually, what do you teach in school? Like, that's why I feel like I've tried to develop marriage skills, marriage techniques, the somatic stuff. My husband also, because it's like, this stuff can work. And just like, let's get the information out there, because you're just going to have a much better, peaceful home. More peace in the home, more peace in the world,
Totally. And nothing is more important. It's funny that a person will go to MBA school and finance school and do an internship and work 80 hours a week at Lehman Stearns or, some of the Goldman Sachs or whatever, and lose it all, literally lose it all in a divorce 10 years later. And they won't spend 15 minutes with a marriage counselor figuring out how to actually have a happy marriage. People will climb mountains for spiritual growth, and they'll do so many different things for their emotional well-being and meditate and yoga and all this kind of stuff and physical well-being. And end up making a decision or end up living in a relationship which is, you know, hell on earth, because they just won't spend a couple weeks with this with a therapist or somebody, even if it doesn't have to be a therapist, it could be a pastor or even finding somebody who has a successful marriage, even a friend, and just going to them in humility and saying, what's your secret? Like, how do I get this done? And it's such a key part of your life. It's the most, in my opinion, you know, it's the most important investment that you can make in your future, both financially and, more importantly, emotionally, right? And happiness wise.
Definitely.
So yeah, we and my wife and I are so excited about it. I mean, we're just really thrilled to be out there and sharing what we consider some of the most foundational secrets. And like you said, they're not even real secrets, but some of the most foundational practices that bring couples together.
Yeah, well, and it goes to show where our priorities are as a society. Like that's true what you mentioned. They will work years to get an MBA and then lose it all into divorce. Schools are supposed to schooling K through 12 is supposed to prepare us for adult life. That's what they tell us. That's not true, but that's what they tell us anyway. If that were the case, why wouldn't they be teaching this stuff so that people aren't getting divorced as often and they're not prioritizing money over marriage and relationships and all that stuff? But last question. You know, I mean, because obviously you guys enjoy what you do. You're great at it. What do you think the landscape looks like for the future? Like, do you think that, because I mean, our divorce rates are out of control. I mean, there's all kinds of horrible messages sent to us about relationships. Do you see things getting better as a society or worse or a little bit of both? What, based on what you've been seeing, where are we headed?
So I'm hopeful, even though it can look pretty dark out there. I feel like there's a lot of light, and I feel like people are really tapping into their spirituality. They're looking for God. They're looking for source. They're looking for to be in a higher vibration. So it can look very messy right now. That's for sure, and a lot of divisiveness. But according to Kabbalah, again, I always go according to my faith, that there is going to be a time of peace, and there is going to be a time of healing. And we just need to find the light and bring the light as much as possible, each one of us.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of look at it, you know, obviously my wife has a great spiritual perspective, which I always appreciate. From more like the boots on the ground type perspective, which is kind of where I live on Twitter, this is how I see it. And I'd be interested in your opinion as well, Jeff. It feels like up till this point in time, marriage was a given. It was considered the rite of passage for every man and every woman. And if you didn't do it, you were kind of looked at as somebody who's kind of bucking the trend a little bit, right? You know, the 40-year-old bachelor is a movie because that was an odd thing, right? To be a bachelor at 40 years old, so to speak. I feel that now we're moving into a different era where marriage is going to be the province of the emotionally privileged. So what that means is that people are going to choose, certain segment of the population will choose marriage and make that sacrifice for marriage. And it's going to be something that is not the status quo, but something that people will choose to create in their own lives with principles that work. And that that people that don't want to or don't see the value or are not willing to put in the effort. See, what you're seeing right now, I can go on for hours, but what you're seeing right now is you're seeing the result of people who got married who didn't know how to be married.
Right.
They just didn't know how to be married. So what's happening is they get married, like we talked about earlier. I love you, I like you, we get married, but they don't know how to be married. They don't even bother learning about how to be married, and then they get divorced. Right. So now what's happening is that men, in particular, a lot of these red pill channels and other type channels, and even women, they're warning against marriage. Now there's so much content on the internet now that's warning you against marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So a young man today, it's very common for a 25, 22-year-old man to say, I'm not getting married. Why would I ever get married? Right. So marriage is only going to be for those who want, instead of it being what was considered the norm, it's going to be considered the choice of the emotionally mature, in my opinion. I hate to use judgmental language, but the emotionally capable, the emotionally mature, and those who are willing to put in the work to be married.
Yeah. Well, I'll use those words. Yeah, it is people who are emotionally intelligent, people who are on a different level. I mean, that's just the way things are. Some people just aren't emotionally where they need to be. I wasn't always either. I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I mean, I still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's almost going to become sort of a counterculture. And, and that's why I always get a little cringy when I hear the word manosphere, because there's a lot of good stuff there. There's a lot of toxicity. You've got the incel culture. They want men to basically treat women like crap and play a lot of mind games. When I'm looking through this stuff, especially after I got divorced, I was like, in the words of Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon, I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. It's not fair because it hurts people,
And it's interesting because as the man being dominant, it's hurting him too.
Yeah. Him too. Yeah, totally.
I don't see that. I do in younger men, and younger black. I want to get married. I saw my parents divorce, their parents divorce. I want to do it right. I want to find the right woman who's going to rock with me on my mission. I'm going to rock with her on her mission. And we're going to make this thing work. And we're going to be ride or die with each other. And I've listened to a lot of different Twitter spaces where they're having these conversations, young black men. I'm like, this is what we need as a community. But this is also what we need as a country. We need more people who are saying, I need to understand how to be a husband, and I need to understand how to love my wife the right way. I'm hearing these young black men saying this stuff. I'm like, that person's probably going to succeed in what he's doing, and we need more of that. So I'm a little bit pessimistic, but I'm also more optimistic too, because I do see the other side of it.
Yes, that's fantastic, and I know, like, even in the Black community, there's so much. I find it, to me, I find many of these channels hosted by Black men about the struggles that they're experiencing and their perspectives on women and marriage. I find them extremely inspiring, inspiring. And for me, it just feels like some of these guys have been through the ringer, like unbelievable, between not having a father, living in certain neighborhoods that are not necessarily family and marriage conducive, and getting up there on YouTube and being like, the behaviors that I've seen growing up and that I'm currently witnessing in my current society are dysfunctional, and they're not acceptable, and we need to make changes and shift the way we behave and see the world in order to have success. I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I am so happy for them. And I know their challenges. It's so hard because they're fighting. So I see it. They're fighting so many battles all at the same time, whether it's their own peers or whether it's oftentimes women in their communities that are lashing out on them for whatever their choices are, or whether it's, secular societies coming down hard on them because they're men, or whether it's stereotyping or racism or whatever. And here they are standing up and saying, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to get this done. And this is how I'm going to do it. And this is what we need to do. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, it is. It is very heartening. So I'm glad to see it. I think things will get better. I mean, I think it's going to be a tough, because society is pushing back against it. But I do think that at some point, people will realize, okay, we can't do this anymore. We got to do something different.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been another great conversation. We got to do this again soon.
You always say that.
I do, because these are things that people don't really talk about enough. So I'm always happy to do it.
Awesome.
But before we sign off, why don't you guys let everybody know where they can find you?
Oh, so I'm at miriamrachel.com. So that's MiriamRacquel.com. I'm also at yourmarriagemagic.com. And those are my websites. I'm on Facebook a lot too. Not so much Twitter, even though I am there. And then my book can be found on Amazon. So it's a fun story to read. And
Yes, yes. Yeah, and you can find out about our marriage program at my website, which is dovidfeldman.com, DOVIDFELDMAN.com. And that is my Twitter handle. That's where all the action is on Twitter, Dovid Feldman, at Dovid Feldman. And yes, I just came out with my first book, which is called 52 Tweaks to a Great Marriage. So if you like, if you end up following me on Twitter, if you're a current follower and you want a deeper dive into some of the principles, kind of like what we were talking about here today, a lot of what we shared, Jeff was just reading through my Twitter feed, but there's a mountain of thought and contemplation and ideas and principles behind each and every tweet. And so this book has some really great ones. But yeah, we'd love to see you at our marriage program if you're interested in, and you can set up a free clarity call. I have a blog, email list, all the good things.
Yeah, I have a clarity call too. Jeffrey, good luck on your book.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure I put all your links to all your books and all that stuff in the show notes too, so people can know. So, but thanks for joining the program.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you
Jeff,
so
you're
much.
the best.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.